Hello and welcome to the Undroppables Playbook, a football podcast. With your hosts, Ashley and Michael, please sit back and enjoy the show.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Undroppables Playbook, a football podcast presented by the Undroppables and sponsored by Analyst Depot. I am one of your hosts, Ashley. This is my lovely co-host, Michael Duncan. How are you?
I'm dandy. How are you?
I'm good. It's been a long week, but I'm going on vacation tomorrow. So.
It's only Wednesday.
I know. It's really been a long one, though. Like today felt like a Friday for how long Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday were.
That must have been a great feeling.
No.
I love Fridays.
No. If it was a Friday, it would be a great feeling, but because the week was so long.
It's only Wednesday.
I know. Anyway, we're going to jump right into it. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today. Our order is going to be a little bit jumbled up today. We have a lovely guest on to start us off, and then we're going to hop into news, of which there is a lot, and we're going to go into our division storylines, preseason storylines for the NFC South. But first, let us welcome fellow Undroppables member, Jose, who is currently studying for his Doctor of Physical Therapy, big UGA fan, and our injury analyst here at the Undroppables. I hate you for it. You had to wear it on the podcast.
Of course.
I like that team a lot more than I did like 6 months ago because now two of them are Eagles. So
yeah, you drafted all of our players.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Hey, I'll take it.
Listen, what I will take is the fact that I beat Jose in a March Madness deal, and he had to wear an Alabama hat.
You did.
It was one of my greatest feats.
Burned
And the thing was, you had several teams in that tournament, and you picked the one that I beat.
Series of unfortunate events.
It really was, and I got Jose, big Georgia guy, to wear an Alabama hat. If you'd like to see that, go to his profile because it's still there.
It is.
Either way, we're going to jump right into a bunch of injury news. I know last year was heinous for injuries. We've had a lot of training camp and pretty severe training camp injuries, what feels like a little bit more than normal. So we'll jump right into that. Kind of are not going to have a super big flow. We're going to flow here, not super structured. But why don't we start us off with some of the training camp injuries? I mentioned to you before the show, very sad about Tim Patrick with the ACL, where he's going to be missing the entire season. Do you think just the season or anything longer than that?
Yeah, I would guess just the season. Unfortunately, he doesn't have age on his side. I think he's 28. So, the Russell Wilson coming in, I was expecting him to kind of be like a little bit of a sleeper guy that, people look at Sutton and Judy to be kind of the guys there, but, they call him Touchdown Tim for a reason. But yeah, so yeah, he'll obviously miss the whole season. I don't know if he had any other structures involved outside of the ACL. I tried to read, but this early, normally they kind of might wait like a week or so to get an MRI due to the inflammation that occurs in the knee. So it's hard to say just yet if he has MCL, meniscus, etc. involved. But regardless, he'll miss the whole year. Normally surgery can be delayed a couple of weeks. Like I just said, with the inflammation, you don't want to go in there whenever the joint's super inflamed. And so he probably, should have surgery by the end of the month. And, typical timeline is, that kind of 9 to 12 month mark. So yeah, I do expect him, obviously should be back by training camp next year, but yeah, it is a big hit for the Broncos.
So
they have a million other receivers.
They do.
Well, yeah. So actually to ask about one of those receivers, KJ Hamler is a guy that I really liked.
Afraid of bears.
And he is afraid of bears. Understandably, they're very large and very scary. He's going into his third year. Last offseason, he suffered from I believe a torn ACL as well as a hip injury in about week 3. He's about to be activated off the PUP. He might have already been, but I saw the news like a day ago or so. Are we thinking that he's going to be able to maybe step into that role and that he's going to be able to handle being back on a football field? Like, what are your thoughts, I guess, on his recovery and ability to replace some of what Tim Patrick is leaving?
Yeah, time frame wise, he should be good, I would assume. They are different body type players. I think Tim Patrick's like 6'4", and then KJ's like, I don't even know how tall he is, but
he's
obviously not 6'4". Definitely like a speedy guy. So I would expect him to have a good year. if you do have, an ACL tear, obviously it's extremely unfortunate, but if you do have one, you do want it to be towards the beginning of the season so that you have that time on your side. So I don't know anything about the hip injury, but I would assume, based on simply time frame and that they're about to activate him, I don't see why he wouldn't be good for the season. Research does show that, production does go down within that first year post-op. So I wouldn't be reaching for him per se in drafts, but definitely a guy that I would have be totally okay targeting because, Russell Wilson, that offense, everyone expects it to be explosive. So I don't see why a speedy guy that, potentially comes out of the slot can't be, Russ's check down guy.
Now, recovering the production going down based off of, is that for a specific injury or injuries in general?
I'm specifically talking ACL.
Okay.
All research shows just they look at these guys that are elite status. Obviously, every person that's in the NFL is of elite status, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they compare like their pre-injury production to their post-injury production. And that first year after, it's always like statistically different. Like there's a noticeable difference in, whatever thing that you're trying to measure with those athletes. It's obvious. So
interesting. I didn't know that. I mean, obviously, like your eyes can tell you that, but stats telling you that is a lot more. One of my big questions, I think it's a bunch of questions wrap up into one. We do have a sheet that Jose provided with us with some notes. Mine is more quarterbacks, right? You have a lot of quarterbacks who got hurt last year, whether it be for only a few weeks or longer than that. I see my New York Giants superstar Daniel Jones on that list. Is there any quarterbacks we can talk in fantasy? Yeah, that's why I cringed a little bit when I said superstar for those listeners who don't have the video.
Why lying? Why? There's no reason to.
Because I have to believe it.
You can believe that he's an average quarterback. That's
He's
where
an
I'd
average
start.
quarterback, but I'm gonna get my hopes up and
I would hope he's an average quarterback.
Average.
That would be my hope for the season, is average.
Either way, with quarterbacks coming off of injury, is there anyone in fantasy or in general football that you're really staying away from, or anyone you're looking to heavily target?
Stay away from maybe Michael Gallup. Not that I don't believe in the talent, but he was injured like week 17, week 18, I believe. So he doesn't have time on his side. So I think, I don't know what date that falls around, but I think it's like early January maybe. So if it unfolded to where he was delayed 3 to 4 weeks in surgery, and then now he's not having surgery till February, and then research shows that the 9-month mark is what you want for ACL return to play. Not that you can't return before it, but that the risk for re-injury goes significantly down for whatever reason after that 9-month mark. So obviously, the medical staffs of these NFL teams know this, so they have no reason to rush these guys back. So
the Cowboys did just lose James Washington, though, which is a little bit of a reason for them to rush back after selling CD.
Yeah.
And then, so I like that. I know what you're meaning, that the facilities don't want to, but in a team struggling with injuries, it might feel like that's a possibility for them to try and speed up Gallup's return.
Yeah, I think the most recent report read is that, Gallup is also admitting that he's not going to be ready for week 1.
I did see that.
These athletes always, hold themselves in such high regard that they can, do anything, physical and all these things. So I think it's obvious that he's not ready if he's also admitting it. So like, kind of another person that we might talk about, J.K. Dobbins, he's still on the PUP, but he's very vocal about, I'm ready. They need to clear me, etc. But Gallup, still 6 weeks out from the season, 5 weeks out from the season, he's already admitting that he's not going to be ready for week 1. Again, not saying I don't believe in the talent, but I'm not going to be drafting him to, try and help me win games early in the season. If I can get him as a steal late and he falls, why not? And I would say the same goes for OBJ. He's still not signed, but he tore his ACL in the Super Bowl, which is early mid-February. These like deeper startup drafts, or even Scott Fishbowl. I saw people reaching for him, and I don't see it like earliest I see him coming back, even if he's signed, is like mid-November. And so I just think there's way more value there for other people around that time than a 28, 29-year-old receiver that's coming off an ACL that got fixed in like February.
So real quick, can you explain to me why it's a bigger deal that J.K. Dobbins not only tore his ACL, but also tore his LCL, and I believe his meniscus as well? Like, why does that matter, and why are we seeing that it sounds like it's a slower recovery for J.K. Dobbins, and it sounds like there's a chance he might be more hampered when he comes back this season?
Yeah, for sure. So the ACL...
but also, can you say it in like the dumbest way possible?
Yeah, no, I got you. So scientific terms, right? So the ACL is responsible for preventing anterior translation of the tibia, which is basically stops the tibia from coming forward. And so the LCL is, on the outside of the knee. And so it's responsible from preventing the tibia going laterally or outside. So it's two different directions, right? So you can think ACL kind of front to back and LCL side to side. And so with like a strict ACL tear, you can incorporate that lateral movement and rehab sooner because you don't have that damaged structure, right? So if the LCL is also torn, you have to allow that to heal. And so you're delaying that lateral movement more. So the rehab is slower. You have to allow it to heal. With the rehab being slower, your strength gains are slower. The athlete, unlike the psychosocial aspect of it, doesn't trust it as soon. So it's just a lot of complications. Typically, it might add a couple weeks, etc. It's not like it's going to add 3 months to his, rehab, but it is definitely a factor.
So it's not so much that it's not a huge increase in the time it takes to heal. It's more so just like it takes longer for the athlete to mentally get that under him, especially for, I would assume, like Brad, we have in the comments, who he said he tore his ACL, LCL, meniscus. He is a washed up D3 college lineman. That is his Twitter bio. I'm not insulting him. But I can imagine, like, I remember when Jason Peters like tore his Achilles like twice, 2 times in a row. He came back, he was just fine. I feel like as someone that is playing a position where so much is dependent on planting and cutting at all times, like the mental side of it, and like not just like mental as in like, oh, I need to convince myself. It's like mentally matching up what you want to do with your body being okay with doing it is what's going to be the much bigger hurdle for JK with this ACL, LCL, and meniscus rather than just the ACL. Did I summarize that well?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, I love that we brought that up. So Jose, I think I told you and our listeners, my undergrad degree is in public health. So I love all things science, data, analytics. So I did research at the end. It was last year when Cam Akers, so about a year ago when Cam Akers got hurt, in the mental recovery from injury, and how the reason that I did was because of all the hate that was spewed at Cam Akers, because everyone hyped him up in fantasy and saying, hey, it's a lot bigger mental game than it is physical. Science has come so far in the last 30 years where now our science is getting us so far so fast and our brain isn't catching up. And a lot of it was just, you have to sit on the sidelines and watch your team do it without you, and then get back out on the field and say, they were doing it without me. Whether it's subconscious or consciously, you're saying, my team stepped up when I wasn't there. Am I going to be able to step up now that I'm back? Is my body going to be the same? Should I really make that plan, or should I just let that guy get a couple extra yards? It's just all like a huge culmination of depression and anxiety and fear coming back from an injury that has 3 facets rather than 1.
Yeah, exactly. You got to remember that, we all play fantasy and it's all fun, but football is these guys' livelihood. It's how they're making their money, etc. So if they're, not performing well, they could miss out on an extension or their game check, etc. So they want to get back as soon as possible. That's why, I love working with athletes because, I don't have to worry about, do they really want to get back? Do they have some other thing that might be preventing them? Like, no, they want to get back on the field as soon as possible. And sometimes it can be detrimental, I want to help my team win, with Akers, it's like, I want to help my team win the Super Bowl. So yeah, there's people I don't think acknowledge the like psychosocial aspect of injuries in these professional athletes, because it is, how they make money. It's their livelihood.
Yeah.
So they definitely want to get back as soon as possible and could potentially put themselves at risk for re-injury if they try and rush it back too quickly.
Yeah, and with not coming back, I know we'll get into a little bit of running back talk here. I want to talk about running back. Duncan has a running back he wants to ask about. Talking about not coming back, we saw Chris Carson officially retire from the NFL this year after a slew of injuries. Do you want to talk a little bit about why you think he decided? I mean, we all know why, but a little bit about his injury and why that led to retirement rather than trying to make a push for coming back.
Yeah. Do you know the specifics on his injury? I know that he had, I think he had a plate put in, correct?
Yes, in his neck, I believe it was like up high on the neck. Let me get the exact injury for you. But hold on.
Yeah, so necks are always concerning, right? So with that, he probably was having some like peripheral symptoms running down his arms, most likely. I don't have the exact details on his injury, but with that hardware being put in his neck,
they had to fuse discs in his neck.
That's what I had, but lower back, lumbar.
Yeah, so disc fusions are always bad,
because
what normally happens is they take out the disc in between the vertebrae, so there's no longer that protective.
You get fused, and you can move like this instead of moving like a snake.
Yeah, exactly. So it makes the like lever arm longer, which is never good. Right, because you want the motion to occur at the segment. So if it's a longer segment, etc. But so he was obviously dealing. It's probably painful, obviously. But he was also dealing with like peripheral symptoms, whether it be sensory or motor. I would assume that it's motor. That he was having, maybe some limitation in how he can move his arms. So yeah, it's really unfortunate. He's one of my favorite players. Love Chris Carson. And I had a feeling whenever the news broke, I was like, never good, right? I was scared last year with Daniel Jones' injury when they started talking about his injury. It was concerning.
I'm still worried about that. Because he flew across like the country several times to seek medical help, and he's based in New York. I think Duncan's going to say New Jersey, based in New York, New Jersey, which have some of the best medical care in the world. I mean, it's California, New York, and Minnesota are some of the best hospitals in the world, and he was consistently flying from New York to California. Is that Chris Carson's, or is that just a regular?
I believe this is Chris Carson's neck.
Okay,
or at least what he had done. So
yes,
that's levels too.
Yeah, exactly. That's 2 levels that's fused. So it looks like 4 to 5 and 5 to 6.
Wow.
Yeah, not.
Those listening, like. I put a picture on the screen.
Yeah.
So
yep. So that was my worry with Daniel Jones last year, with the extent of which they were keeping everything very under wraps. I understand why they didn't. The team sucked anyway. Not letting him play was a smart thing, but not having him come back and having him fly across the country was one of my worries too. But I'm sad about Chris Carson. I also loved him. But I think in the long run, playing with an injury that is something you're risking your limbs from not working anymore. At a running back position, when you're getting tackled so heavily with such force, the risk of fusions, if they fuse correct, are very hard to break. But the risk of one wrong hit dislodging a fusion and becoming paralyzed, I don't think is worth the risk.
Yeah, exactly. No, you stole my words with him being a running back and just the amount of contact that they take.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not worth it, in my opinion. So I think he made the right personal choice.
Yeah. Duncan, you want to ask about your running back?
I actually wanted to ask about a different running back first. And this actually, I was going to ask about this after you mentioned Cam Akers, but specifically a running back that I absolutely love, and that's James Robinson, who suffered an Achilles injury. I forget when it was last season. I think it was toward the end. But he suffered an Achilles injury, and he's not even on the PUP. And for those of you that don't know what the PUP is, it's the physically unable to perform list. And basically, if you start the offseason program in training camp on the PUP, you can be taken off at any point, even after a single practice. But once training camp starts, you can't be put on the PUP. But you can be put on the, it's not
IR.
Oh, yeah, you can be put on the IR. If you remain on the PUP to the start of the season, you have to miss at least 4 games, which was changed this year. So most people were kind of shocked that James Robinson was not put on the PUP, especially after
Me included.
a very short amount of time after the Achilles injury. And I guess the question I'd like to ask is, we saw Cam Akers come back. To be honest, he didn't really look great.
Yeah.
We've never really seen a high-level running back tear their Achilles and come back to the same level.
Yeah.
Cam Akers was going to be that kind of first example. Deonta Foreman has now come back, like seemingly 19 years later. In reality, it's like 3, but it feels like a much longer period of time.
Yeah.
Will James Robinson be the person to break this streak? And also, why is this particular injury so difficult to come back from?
Yeah. So I was looking. So it looks like he tore it week 16.
Wow.
So obviously late in the season.
Forgot it was that late.
Yeah. Yeah. I have him in my home league, so that one hurt my heart. Big James Robinson fan.
Duncan flew all the way to Europe to go watch him.
Really? Very nice.
I did. He scored a touchdown right in front of me. It was really nice. I tried to buy his jersey and they didn't have it for sale. And honestly, I think that London should be Brexited from Brexit for that. I don't know if I used those terms right, but it's fine.
Yeah.
Sorry, he interrupted you.
No,
you interrupted.
I know.
No, but if you look at the history of this injury, it's not good, and specific to running back, it is terrible. So I think that's why the whole Twitter community was up in arms after the Cam Akers injury, just kind of writing him off, oh, his career's over, Thankfully for both these guys, they do have age on their side. I think James Robinson's 23. I think Akers is also 23. But yeah, no, I was severely surprised at what Cam Akers was able to do. The videos of his rehab servicing only 4 months after injury was absurd. Cutting, doing all these running back drills, crazy. So the Achilles is a terrible injury for these high level athletes. One reason is because the Achilles has a poor vascular supply, so there's not a lot of blood flow in the area. And so you want a high blood flow for healing purposes. That's how the body helps heal that tendon. It brings the nutrients to the blood, etc. So with the blood supply being low, it prolongs healing, obviously. And so the primary purpose of the Achilles is plantar flexion, or pointing your toes down. And so that motion is pertinent with running, right? You're going to push off of the ball of your feet to propel yourself forward, right? So that in conjunction with the poor vascular supply, the incisions are normally large, and it's just a rough injury to have if you're an athlete or not. And so yeah, super surprised at what Cam Akers did. The recent report says that James Robinson took some team drills today, which is crazy. Yeah, so I don't know if he's going to, Cam Akers' efficiency last year was terrible post-injury, as expected, right? Any major injury, their production is going to go down. So I'm hoping that James Robinson can beat it. It's so new, right? This has not happened before. You don't have these guys coming back from Achilles so quickly. So I'm really excited to see how it plays out. I'm looking forward to see how Cam Akers does this year with him being able to come back. I want to see if those efficiency numbers go up. With James Robinson, I think it's coach speech, but Doug Peterson said that he thinks that he could be back by mid-August, which is preseason, right?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
That's wild. That's the thing I was talking about earlier, of how crazy it is, how much science has developed. 10 years ago with an Achilles injury, we would just absolutely write them off.
Yeah.
No way, they may never play football again. And now they're coming back in the same cycle of the season, from Cam Akers. And while Duncan and I have had many conversations on and off the podcast about how he didn't love what he looked like, but he was able to make a recovery in the postseason after tearing his Achilles in the preseason, which is wild. Staying on the topic of running backs, I know Duncan brought him up in our pre-show, but I'll bring him up since he asked you about the last one. Saquon Barkley, who has a fairly long injury history, who in 2020...
Why don't I preface it with what some of his injuries were?
I was going to do that. I literally have the list here.
I thought you were going to sugarcoat it.
No, I wasn't going to sugarcoat it. I mean, the biggest ones for him were starting 2020 when he had I did look it up, non-contact ACL injury in week 2 of 2020, then strained his MCL in the same game. So it wasn't a tear, but strained the MCL, and then had a really, you called it freak accident, low ankle injury in week 5 last year, which was a total freak accident, but also absolutely disgusting. I'm just wondering what your outlook is for him this year. I know you said you love him. I do too, but as just looking at it from the outside looking in without that love, what do you think his outlook is?
Real quick, I just want to add, you did sugarcoat it. He has had ankle sprains twice in college, as well as another one in 2019. So freak accident or not, it's not the first time he's injured that same ankle.
No, I agree. Yeah, their ankle sprains, I usually don't mention those because most players have that. But I'm saying his biggest injuries started in 2020 with the ACL. And he was the same one who was not the same mentally afterwards. He would stutter step in the backfield because he was just a little bit afraid to hit a tight hole and get through. So I know you were going to say that the second I said it. But, you could tell that he was doubtful of his own skills. But either way, you can answer my question. What is your outlook on him?
Yeah, so I love Saquon this year. Anytime a running back tears their ACL, I can't remember if I said it in the episode or right before the show, but efficiency numbers go down in that the first year post injury. So now he has that full year behind him, right? Wow, it is storming very loudly where I'm at.
Wow.
That's really loud.
I thought there was some mic little interference going. That was a really loud
lightning thunder outside.
I love thunder.
So he's a full another year removed from the injury, right? The psychosocial aspect now is obviously he should be trusting it way more. The videos coming out of training camp, these super acrobatic catches that he's making makes me believe that he does fully trust it. He is a freak athlete, obviously, one of the highest graded running backs coming out of college ever. So I think the ACL injury is behind him, hopefully. The MCL, anytime an MCL happens, the sprains are normally not that big of an issue. If it's a grade 1, really you could even have the potential to not miss a game. And then the ankle, the ankle was a freak accident. He stepped on, I think it was a guy from the other team, and man, the way it rolled in the balloon that ensued, it was giant, right? So it was likely at least a grade 2 ankle sprain, meaning that the ligaments were actually really stretched. Kind of
unspecified grade 1.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But yeah, so it ballooned up. Ankle sprains don't really concern me too much. If they're chronic, like Duncan said, you could have, chronic
re-rolling.
The ligaments come a little bit lax, right? Mm-hmm. So he could be prone to more ankle sprains in the future. But yeah, no, I'm all over Saquon this year. He's going in the 4th round of dynasty startups. I don't know where he's going in redraft. I haven't looked at redraft much yet. I love him at that price. He's still only 25. They improved the offensive line. They improved the wide receiving core. Hopefully Daniel Jones has a better year. Opens up Saquon more. Obviously he can catch passes out of the backfield. So I love Saquon this year.
Me too. I love him for you.
So I think last thing we've got for you, and this is specifically a question from someone in the comments, not comics. Yeah, I don't really know what I was doing. Mr. Scampers, and this is on Darius Shaquille Leonard's back surgery. Okay. He's had a couple of issues, but there was a nerve they believe there was a nerve in his back that was causing pain, I guess, in the off season. He only had surgery as of June, and an ankle injury lingered last season into this off season a little bit. And I guess specifically with the back surgery, I've been trying to find out exactly what it is, so I can, tell you, if you didn't already know what it was. But what type of impact do you think that'll have for a guy in terms of his like mobility and especially in like the lower half of his body, I guess?
Yeah, so I wasn't even aware that he had surgery. So it says, quote, that the calf wasn't firing right. So that makes me think kind of really low back, kind of S2-ish area, more sacrum than lumbar. So it seems like he must have some kind of nerve entrapment. Could have been, some kind of slip disc, even potentially if it is like L5, S1 area that's pressing on that nerve root. But it seems like the ankle injury that he suffered stemmed from the back, from what I'm reading. Which is very likely because the nerves that are responsible for having those muscles fire, if they're not firing properly, you're not running right, you're not cutting right, etc. It predisposes you to injury. Back surgery is never good, right? I want to avoid back surgery at all cost.
I can attest to that.
Yeah. So I haven't read at all about his injury, but if I had to guess, it would be some kind of nerve entrapment, potential disc. Yeah. So
all of the reports don't have anything. I looked through a couple of them. I don't see anything that specifies this specific injury. So it does make it a little bit of a broader question. But yeah, I can attest to that. Back surgery in any matter is not great, but it's something that they could have done if it was just like a super simple nerve entrapment and they were able to do it arthroscopically and just get a small incision and get it out. But if it was something with a disc, I think that, you can correct me if I'm wrong, does lengthen the recovery a little bit more and make it a little bit more risky for him.
Yeah, this tweet that's on this article that I'm currently checking says the team actually believes that he'll be back near training camp. That tweet was June 3rd.
Yeah, and he said his ankle on leg already feel better.
Yeah. So, any time that there's, I'm assuming here, obviously I don't know what the injury is, but anytime that there is like some kind of nerve entrapment, whenever they do surgery to fix that, it's like immediate relief, right? If they get what the problem is. So if that's what he's saying, I can assume that's the procedure that he had done. And if he's already feeling better with his lower leg, it's safe to assume that the surgery went well. So I don't see why, he couldn't be back. It's not like there might be some atrophy in like his like lower back muscles, but it's not like a ACL where you got to really re-strengthen that quad or really re-strengthen the calf and the Achilles, etc. It's really just more so that the nerves are firing properly and then the incision heals.
Yeah. Well, Jose, I know we are just about out of time today. We really appreciate you coming on. Yeah. Once we inch closer to the season, I think we'll have you on again, go through a little bit of last of redraft and people who are looking to just know about their teams. We'll promote a little bit, have everyone come ask some questions in the comments. Thank you to those who asked Jose questions in the comments. But before we send you off, why don't you tell us where we can find you on your socials and the rest of your content?
Yeah, so I really only have Twitter that's going for me right now. You can find me at FF_injury. And then I haven't put out an article yet this season, but the Undroppables website, I try and do maybe like an article every couple of weeks there during the season. And then I also have an injury tracker that I keep up to date each week during the season to try and stay on top of the injuries.
Yep. And anybody who plays fantasy, Jose's injury tracker is incredible and is very helpful. And if you're looking to speak more directly with Jose, he did plug his Twitter, but you can also come speak with him and the rest of the team about injuries on the Undroppables Discord, which you can get by getting on Patreon.
For sure.
Awesome. But thank you so much, Jose. We will have you back on soon. Please stay safe in that storm.
Yeah, guys. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Jose.
Have a great night.
See you guys.
All right. Well, a lot of interesting tidbits. I knew, like I said, I knew in my head about the production levels post ACL, but having it in numbers is actually really interesting. I didn't know that was actually a numerical thing that was published.
For sure.
Yeah. Awesome. So the rest of our show today, the second half of our show is going to consist of some news and some NFC South storylines. There is a good amount of news to go over. There's one key piece that I'm going to talk about a little bit more, but we can kind of go through the first ones briefly. The Hall of Fame game is tomorrow, Thursday night, between the Jags and the Raiders. Cardinals are really like going through it right now. Marquise Brown was arrested this morning for criminal speeding at 7:05 this morning. Don't know if he was like late to training camp or what that was all about. But he was reportedly going over 85 miles an hour. It is classified as a class 3 misdemeanor, punishable by up to 30 days in jail, a fine of $500, and or up to 1 year of probation. Staying on the Cardinals train, we're going to have to talk about this one though. Cardinals have rescinded their study clause for Kyler Murray. After we had a full conversation about it last week, the next day as always, news came out that they rescinded it. I know you have a strongly opinionated about this, but why don't we?
We'll be quick because this isn't even near the most important thing that we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
But how stupid are you as an organization?
Yep.
If you put it in there, just leave it. God damn it. Like the dude called his own press conference so he could talk about that specific part of it. It's so stupid. It's so dumb. It's so unnecessary. Like, it was there for a reason. It was not accidentally put in there. The Cardinals were like, no, we did. We believe they just. No, clearly you don't, because you put it in the contract. It does not get in that contract accidentally. And to say that it did is like, it's bullcrap. It's ridiculous. The fact that they rescinded it is hysterical. The fact that they didn't see this coming is even funnier.
Yeah.
It's just
that's what they said. They were like, we didn't see it was going to cause such an uproar.
You're an idiot, and you're not paying attention. Whoever made that decision is a moron. So that's all.
My one thing I will say about that is that I found a tweet today. I sent it in our UN chat, and I will let you know where you can find it. You can find it on Twitter. It was posted by @It'sKyleCovers on Twitter. And he said he found, I don't know if he did this himself, no, it was on Reddit, a post from Reddit that says a statistical analysis of NFL quarterback Kyler Murray's performance shows that he plays worse when there's an active double XP weekends happening in Call of Duty. There were rumors saying that he played a lot of Call of Duty even during the season, and he goes through to look at his passer rating, passing yards, completion percentage, and win-loss record, of which his non-2XP weekend is 18-6-1, and on his 2XP weekends it's 4-7 for win-loss record. So
when you gotta grind with the boys, you gotta grind with the boys. I think that's
and that's why there was a clause that says playing video games in the background doesn't count.
Yep. Shout out his squad mates. So,
and staying on Kyler Murray has COVID. So he'll be out for the next couple of days. I think that came out on like Monday-ish, earlier on in the week. But he does have COVID. And the big news that I did want to talk about, we found out over the weekend the NFL was going to release their the Independent Investigation Council was going to release their findings and recommendation from the Deshaun Watson hearings. Judge Sue L. Robinson was the one presiding over it, and the ultimate decision that she came to was a 6-game suspension for Watson, in which he would really lose no money because of his really messed up contract format. The NFL has appealed that, in which Roger Goodell will be able to have the final say, or someone he nominates will have the final say. The whole process is very weird. The NFLPA is now suing the NFL about it. It's expected to go up to federal court because the NFLPA says, there's a lot of acronyms here, says that the CBA, which is the collective bargaining agreement of all the players, and the NFL said that Goodell can't do this, but technically it does. It's very strange. But there's a good chance that if this keeps going to court, that Watson is still going to be on like the exempt list while going through it and then have suspensions. But Goodell has requested it had to be two business days, so it should be through now. And he requested an indefinite suspension with minimum of a year, I believe. I don't know if it was official or what they were the insiders say.
I just want to be clear. I don't think requested is the correct word. And I think wording is very important. I think that's what his end goal is. I believe So again, just wanted to be clear that that seems important to clarify.
Yep. And I recommend everyone who is looking to learn more about the case or talk more about the case to read Sue Robinson's decision. And I'm going to say I'm really sick of the argument, well, you're fighting against a woman judge. I don't care that it's a woman judge if personally I think it's unjust. But if you do go on to read her her findings from the report, she says he has done this. She's basically saying, guilty for him, even though it's not a criminal court. She's saying he is a danger to other people to do this again. He's likely he could do this again. There is a clause in her suspension that says he can only see team massage therapists, which in and of itself is saying basically we don't trust you to go anywhere else because we know this is what you did. But the most interesting part of it all is that she made her 6-game suspension. She is very clear that that's the number because of the NFL's history with suspensions relating to sexual violence. Well, she doesn't like the term sexual violence. She doesn't call it, she says it's not sexual violence, it's sexual mischief or whatever. But it's because of how the NFL has handled cases like this in the past that they decided to go with 6 games because the NFL has set this precedence themselves, which I can't argue with. Everything's sort of like this. Crimes against women, sexual assault, physical, domestic assault, it has been minorly prosecuted compared to weed and betting on your own team. And overall, I'm just disappointed with the outcome of it. I did put out a Twitter thread. I don't have to go into all of it right now, but as someone who has faced sexual assault before, my stomach and my heart my stomach's in a knot and my heart is shattered, and I think it's absolutely disgusting. And I really do feel bad for everyone who's just going to kind of have to put their experiences behind them, their past behind them, in order to do their job with working with a sexual predator. So,
yeah, I mean, I don't have a lot to add. I agree with everything you said. So, if it's all right with you, I'm going to move on unless there's more you want to talk about. Great.
No, please do.
So in other news, this was released a day after the Deshaun Watson stuff started going down. The Dolphins have been found guilty of tampering between the years of 2019 and 2022 on 3 occasions through conversations with quarterback Tom Brady and the agent for then New Orleans Saints coach Sean Payton. This does have to do with the same investigation that was being held in regards to the purposeful losing of games that was, I guess, brought up by former head coach Brian Flores. They were not found guilty of that to any degree. But for the tampering, they will lose their 2023 first-round pick as well as a 2024 third-round pick. And the owner, Ross is his last name, Stephen Ross, will be suspended through October 17th. He will not be able to be at any Dolphins facility or any team event or anything. And he was fined $1.5 million, as well as the vice chairman / limited partner Bruce Beal being fined $500,000 and is sort of basically suspended from league meetings for the rest of the 2022 season. So that was interesting. That came, I knew they were doing the thing about looking into the, trusting the process of it all, but I did not expect to hear anything about tampering. I kind of just thought that would kind of just never be talked about by the league, because obviously we remember the reports of, they're going to team up Tom Brady and Sean Payton in Miami. Like, that's why Tom Brady's retiring right now or whatever. Didn't really ever expect anything to come of it, but apparently there's smoke where there's fire, and this is what came of it. Tom Brady and Sean Payton will not incur any issues when it comes to this. But yeah, a somewhat surprising and fun twist in the middle of the week.
Yeah, lots of big news this week is what it is. We mentioned Tim Patrick towards ACL in our earlier segment. Lots of injury news. Same thing as always. Please go look up that news for yourself, because we could make an entire show just about training camp and injury news. All of that is readily available on NFL.com and throughout wherever you consume your media. Really, it is everywhere. But we have about 15 minutes left. We're going to speed through our new division, and that will be the NFC South. in which we have the Falcons, Panthers, Saints, and Bucks. Why don't you lead us off with the NFC South?
Yeah, so once again, we're just going to be talking about storylines that we're interested in, and basically going to be keeping an eye on personally throughout this 2022 season. Because, outside of just, will this guy play well? Will, the fantasy aspect of it all, we're just intrigued by how these different things will kind of last. But the first thing that I'm keeping my eye on in the NFC South for the Atlanta Falcons is Marcus Mariota being back as a starting quarterback for the first time, at least in a consistent role since his time with the Titans. There is a part of me that has always had a slight, a part of my heart has always been there for Marcus Mariota, because I remember the days where we were going to trade our entire team to reunite Chip Kelly with Marcus Mariota, and then we were going to go win 20 straight Super Bowls. Obviously, I didn't pan out for anyone involved in any of that. But yeah, it'll be interesting because he played fairly well in the couple of opportunities that he's gotten in Oakland/Las Vegas the past couple years. And now he's got a chance to be a starting quarterback again, at least in the short term. The problem is that the Atlanta Falcons have one of the worst offensive rosters in the entire NFL. I mean, they have Kyle Pitts, who you're going to talk about in a little bit, but outside of him, they have no one, because Calvin Ridley is suspended for a year at least due to gambling. And after that, they have, Bryan Edwards, who has not done anything in his NFL career, and not a ton else. So not a lot to be excited about, with the exception of maybe Cordero Patterson. But yeah, also Drake London. Wow. Totally went over my head. I'm very sorry. Yeah, Drake London, obviously first round pick, first rookie off the board, first wide receiver off the board in the 2022 NFL draft. I'm having a great night. But yes, outside of a rookie and a second-year tight end in Kyle Pitts, not a ton going on there. So Marcus Mariota is getting a chance to be a starting quarterback again. However, not exactly the ideal situation in which he's going to be able to show that maybe he's improved from the last time that he was a starting quarterback.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's probably going to be one of the most overall interesting storylines, not of the NFC South, but of the entire league, that I think it's really going to be a coin flip on that one. I'm still, my internal jury is still out. But for me, I'm looking at, can Kyle Pitts have a year two jump? I know he was not bad, but he was not the once in a generation tight end in year one, which a lot of go ahead, read it.
It's okay. Kyle Pitts and Drake London are Spider-Man meme, said Mr. Scampers on YouTube. And honestly, couldn't have said it any better myself. And no, Abe, I did not forget Tyler Asgiel. I just don't care.
Yeah. But for me, I'm looking if Kyle Pitts can make a big jump. And I was, very clear with a lot of people. So were a lot of other people about Kyle Pitts last year in the first place, especially in a league like Redraft, because notoriously tight end is one of the hardest positions to transition from college to the NFL. So while he was decent, maybe good, he did not have that once in a generation season like everyone was hoping. But now that he is the number one target on that offense, it's clear that he has a very good chance to make that step up with someone like Drake London on the field with him. I think will be really helpful. They both are very similar heights and builds, if I'm remembering correctly.
Spider-Man meme.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. So Spider-Man meme. But they're both really tall, should be decent threats in the red zone. So I'm excited to see if he makes that jump, and if they're going to play him in a very true tight end style or more in a wide receiver role, which was the same question last year, but with now another really good wide receiver on the team, how are they going to use him now?
It's a very good question. Also, this is the Spider-Man meme. Just wanted to show it. I like Spider-Man. Nothing wrong with that. But yes, why don't you take us to what you are interested in examining about the Carolina Panthers for this upcoming season?
Yeah, so I'm going to go with really low-hanging fruit and just talk about Baker Mayfield. I'm really interested to see what Baker Mayfield looks like outside of the Browns organization that is an absolute disaster of an organization as of late, as of like
As of
always,
late, what?
as of late, but as of always.
They had like
But
a year when they weren't.
yeah, I know.
That was it.
So that's why I said as of late, but as of always. So yeah, I'm interested to see how much of it was just a really messed up organization and injury. I'm going to put that on there because he has had a little bit of injuries, a troubled injury history in the last few years. So how much of it, it's the same way I phrased my question for Allen Robinson, but how much of it was the Browns and injury, and can he actually sustain an offense, even though it is not a super high powered offense? Really, the high power there has been Christian McCaffrey, who's been hurt, and DJ Moore, which you'll talk about. But an offense, can he elevate that offense to be a little bit more high powered? And would he be able to sustain staying quarterback with several people behind him to take his spot? I'm not saying they're elite, but he does have a couple in line behind him that could easily take a spot.
Yeah, and I think that goes right along with what I'm really going to be paying attention to with the Panthers, which is one of my favorite players in the NFL, and that's DJ Moore. I love DJ Moore. I've loved him since he came out. And honestly, he has been about as consistent, it feels like, as really any player in the NFL since he's been in the league. I mean, his rookie year, he had 788 yards, and since then he's had 1,175, 1,193, 1,157. In his rookie season, he had 2 touchdowns. In the years since, he's had 4, 4, and 4. He's been very consistent, very good. He's an incredible player with all the talent in the world, but I really want to be him. I want to see him be able to take that next step, and I'm hoping that Baker Mayfield can be the guy to help him do that. Sam Darnold is terrible at throwing touchdowns, and I'm not even going to bring up the people that have been playing other than Sam Darnold for DJ Moore, but Baker Mayfield is consistently better at throwing touchdowns at the NFL level. If DJ Moore has that same season with about 1,100, 1,200 yards, but he gets to, 8 touchdowns, 10 touchdowns, I think he's really going to be able to be seen as taking that next step toward the elite echelon of the wide receivers in this league. Because, again, I think he has that talent. And I think this offense as a whole, I think they have the pieces to help Baker be good enough to help DJ Moore be good. I mean, obviously, you've got Christian McCaffrey as well. Robbie Anderson, who almost sort of retired, but also changed the spelling of his name, which is incredible. I didn't really even know you could just do that on a whim. I guess if it's a nickname, it doesn't matter. Whatever. But yeah, I love DJ Moore. I'm really looking forward to seeing him with probably the most capable quarterback that he's had in his career so far, what he's going to be able to do. Chances are this time next year, I'll be saying the same thing about whoever is going to be their next quarterback. But for right now, ignorance is bliss. And I'm just going to try and look forward to what DJ Moore is going to do this season because I love him and I care about him.
Yeah, you sold me on him last season, so I've still been riding the train along with you. So I'm very excited for DJ Moore too. Also, did Robbie Anderson retire?
No, he didn't retire.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say, do you think he's gonna be at all relevant? I know it's not our
no, not for fantasy wise, is my guess, but
you never know. It's Robbie Anderson. All right, we'll jump into the Saints. We both have very different topics here, but I can start off with Alvin Kamara. I'm going to pull up the actual exact charges he has, but Alvin Kamara has an outstanding legal issue. And I just don't know how much he is going to play. It is a outstanding legal issue from the Super Bowl when he was in Las Vegas. No, in Los Angeles, right? It was where was it? I'm getting all mixed up. I should have let you first.
It was Vegas.
Pro Bowl. That's what it was. Sorry. Vegas and Pro Bowl, not Super Bowl. I was getting the two confused. Where he was involved in a really bad assault. He was an assailant in the assault. And all of the charges and cases are still outstanding, and it is very likely he can face suspension time and maybe the exempt list. So I've been staying away from Alvin Kamara this year. I mean, there is a chance. It's a very broad statement, but looking to see how all of these legal proceedings against Alvin Kamara pan out.
Yeah, Alvin Kamara is an insanely talented guy, but very confusing.
Yep. Yes. And it's like so much of it is still huge question marks with it. And I think a lot of people are letting that. There's been a lot of legal stuff going on in the NFL. I mean, you had Henry Ruggs happen, you had him happen, you now have Deshaun Watson happening. So there's been it feels like his has almost stepped into the back burner, and people are forgetting that that's still outstanding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the guy that I am interested in seeing for the Saints this season is a man named Michael Thomas, who we've talked about a couple times. But earlier this week, I kind of reminded myself of what has gone on with him really over the past couple of years since he set the NFL record for most receptions in a season. They went through a little thing in 2020, I believe it was, after he got injured in kind of week 1. He decided to play through it so as not to lose his last year with Drew Brees. There were a lot of tweets that he sent out that were very vague and just kind of very wide receiver-y in the nature of, I don't know, calling himself not a snake, but the Saints were trying to make him one. It was very odd. It didn't really make a ton of sense. But there was a rift between the team, maybe the head coach, and Michael Thomas. Obviously, that ended up, that quieted down. He didn't get traded or anything. But then he didn't play at all last season. He elected to not have surgery, and he tried to rehab throughout the offseason prior to last season. It ended up not working, and he didn't get the surgery until really close to the regular season, and he ended up just never playing, even after expected to be back after about 6 weeks. So really weird stuff going on the entire saga. Apparently he's healthy. He's not going to be playing with Drew Brees. He will be playing with Jameis Winston. But I'm really just intrigued to see if he's going to be able to recapture the form that, I mean, he was incredibly consistent from the first day that he stepped in the NFL. He was very good, and part of that was, he had Drew Brees throwing him the ball. So I'm excited to see what it looks like for him in a post-Drew Brees world, post-injury world, hopefully, and see if he's the guy that we kind of thought he was, and he's insanely talented, or if maybe it was Drew Brees. I cannot hear you. Oh,
There we go. You hear me now?
you're back.
So my thing was, are you still sticking with your last week's statement of you're not going to get hype on him until?
Oh yeah,
late on. Okay,
Yeah.
just checking. And our last team to talk about in the NFC South with perfect timing is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I can go really quickly first. Mine is about, what is the tight end room going to look like after Gronk's retirement? And also, will Gronk stay retired the entire season? Kind of goes into that play. But their depth chart right now has Cameron Brate as the tight end 1, but the tight end room is Cameron Brate, Kyle Rudolph, K-Dot. And so I'm interested to see what that room looks like, if it's a spot that's going to be run a little bit more committee-like, if they're going to be involved more in blocking, and just how the entire scheme changes with a new head coach and missing a key piece of the offense like Gronkowski.
Yeah, and speaking of blocking, the thing that I am recently very intrigued by when it comes to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers is the fact that their offensive line is seemingly falling apart.
Mm-hmm.
I have not seen an update on Tristan Wirfs, who I know left practice either today or yesterday.
I think they said he's all right, nothing serious.
Okay. Oh, yeah, he is fine.
Yeah.
He did get carted off, but yeah, it looks to be just cramps. So that's good to hear. But they did lose their starting very good center in Ryan Jensen. And really, the thing that concerns me is the fact that Tom Brady, being Tom Brady, is so dependent on having time in the pocket for years. And this is before he's been, 40-something years old. If you could get to him, you're probably you have a much better chance of beating him. That's how the Giants did it twice in the Super Bowl. That's how the Eagles did it in the Super Bowl. So if the offense, you saw it last year in the playoffs with Tristan Wirfs being injured. And if these issues continue, I'm just curious, at 40, whatever years old Tom Brady is at this point, how well is he going to be able to hold up with a seemingly lesser than great offensive line with one starter already down for the count, which is disappointing. Then again, it's Tom Brady, so who knows?
Yeah.
But I mean, maybe it doesn't matter at all. But that's what I'm intrigued to. I'm going to keep my eye on and I guess see what happens.
I completely agree with you. He is a completely different player, like absolute two sides of a coin when he doesn't have time in the pocket. So that should be really interesting. And that is actually perfect timing for us to finally wrap up for the day. Thank you all who sat with us today on this lovely Wednesday evening. Duncan, why don't you tell people where we can find you?
You can find me on Twitter at mpduncan75. You can find me here Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Playbook with you, Ashley. You can find me in the Undroppables Discord, which you can get access to by going to our Patreon and Patreoning us. Yep.
Being a patron.
That. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
You can do that. And yeah, you can find me wherever you need to find me, whenever you want to find me. So, and real quick, before we say goodbye, I just want to give a shout out to Abe on DFS Docket, which their show is starting not long after ours is ending. If you're watching live or if you're listening, you can also find DFS Docket on streaming platforms. So yeah, check him out. Check that show out. They're going to be talking running backs for the upcoming season. And they should be starting very soon after we hang up, but just want to give him a shout out real quick.
Love that. And you can find me on Twitter at Ashley_Marie with 2 A's and Ashley. I completely forgot. Did you want to show that video before we go?
No.
Okay.
We'll save it for next week.
Okay. You can find me on Twitter at Ashley_Marie with 2 A's and Ashley. You could find me also on the Undroppables Discord channels by becoming a patron. You could find all of my content at theundroppables.com and here every Wednesday night. Not next Wednesday, though. You could find me in Disney World that day. But most Wednesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time live or wherever you listen to your podcasts later on. Duncan has been publishing them pretty fast. So if you just missed the show, you should have access to it a few hours later. Thank you all for watching, hanging out. If you feel like you enjoyed yourself, make sure to leave us a review on Spotify and Apple Music, 5-star preferably, and recommend us to whoever likes to listen to football. I will take whatever. Well, we just like reviews.
I'm fine with average.
Yeah, in a world full of, I don't know what I was going to say. Being average is fine. Thank you guys for hanging out. We will see you very soon, next 2 weeks, I believe.
Bye, everyone.
Have a great night.